welcome to Blessed, Not Stressed. This is Motherhood, and I'm really excited today to be having a conversation with Emily, and Emily is the owner of High Five Communications Resource, and I would love for you to introduce yourself a bit more, Emily, and what you do, and welcome.
Sure. So my name is Emily Goudreault. I am a pediatric speech-language pathologist. And bear with me, I have a little bit of a cold tonight. My voice doesn't sound great. So I work with a variety of kids, ages, birth, all the way up to 18. I've also worked with adults. I currently mostly focus my practice on children in the birth to maybe 4 to 5 years range. I also teach a couple classes. Like Tanya, I teach a baby sign language class. And I teach a few other classes for infants and toddlers and their caregivers. So I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Yes, and some of your classes look phenomenal, such as the Foundations class. Okay, so tonight I guess we wanted to just have a conversation back and forth and just fill in some information that we would like to share with families and moms that are watching. So if you don't mind sharing, in terms of a speech and language pathologist, why baby sign language helps the child development for infants?
Yeah. So we know that baby sign language, or teaching your child how to sign as an infant or toddler, really helps their oral and verbal vocabulary later. So research has shown us that children who learned how to sign as infants and toddlers have larger vocabularies of verbal words. They make longer sentences as older toddlers. They have a better understanding of oral language, so they understand language better, and they have better scores on language tests. And there's tons of other research out there on how learning sign language as an infant or toddler also decreases frustration, helps with emotional regulation, possibly even helps with IQ scores. But tonight I just kind of want to talk about the language aspect. So as a speech therapist, that's mostly what I'm interested in. So first of all, we know that children can physically sign before they can physically talk. Talking requires coordination and control of multiple body systems. So you have to be able to control your breathing. You have to be able to put your vocal folds or your vocal cords together at the right time. And you also have to move different parts of your mouth at the right time, and that requires a lot of coordination. So your tongue has to move, your lips have to move, and you have to put all three of those things together all at the right times, and that takes a lot of practice. Yeah, so signing, we know kids can do that well before they can actually start talking. And so when we teach our babies and our toddlers how to sign, it does multiple things to help with their increasing their language skills. So the first thing is that it increases their infant-directed speech, which basically is a fancy way of saying it increases how much we as caregivers talk with them. So it's a very, very well-documented factor that how quickly kids learn language is how much we as adults talk to them. So a great example of this is that pretend you're out on a walk with your child, and you're buzzing along in your stroller, and your child looks up at the sky and either signs bird or says birdie. And you know that they're seeing a bird and thinking about the bird, and they're excited about the bird. And you might say, birdie, that's right, it's a birdie. Oh, there goes the bird, it's flying away. It's a bluebird, bye-bye, bluebird. So you're pouring all of this language into them. Now, on the other hand, if your child was walking along with you and they never signed bird and they never said bird, you might just continue walking along in silence, enjoying the lovely day, but not really talking with them. And so when your child is able to communicate with you, we pour more language into them. And I'm sure that you see that as well, Tanya.
I do, and it makes so much sense. I always talk about the child-led play, child-directed speech, because it shows more of the interest level of the child too, right? Our middle child, our daughter, was very much into birds, everything. And if she didn't have that, we might have not known she wanted the birds or wanted to chase the birds or things like that. So it also comes to the empowerment. So we can have a conversation about what they're actually wanting to communicate and share and let us know what's actually happening in their minds, because they're just sponges. So,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think we all tend to pay attention to things more when we're interested in them. So a great example, and I always share this example in my classes, is that my husband works in the beer industry and he makes beer every day. And when he comes home from work, I say, hey, how was your day? And I really do want to know how his day was. But then he kind of starts talking about yeast and barrels and, you know, going on and on. And then I just kind of tune out because it's not that interesting to me. I mean, I'm interested in his day, but I'm not that interested in the beer making process. And I think that you could say the same thing. Yeah, I think you could say the same thing about kids. When we are talking about something that's interesting for them, they're going to pay attention more. And so, you know, that's a great example of little kids that love birds, and say that you have a child at the zoo and you're looking at the elephants and you're talking on and on and on and on about the elephants, and your child is looking at the bird that's hopping around underneath the elephants. Well, if you know that they're interested in the bird and they're signing bird, you can then focus on what they're interested in, and they're going to pay more attention and retain more of that, and they're going to soak up more of that language. So that's another great reason why sign language increases language skills. So if you think about, say, a 14-month-old who has 10 verbal words versus a 14-month-old that has 10 verbal words and 10 signs, we're going to know twice as much of what they're thinking, and we're going to talk with them twice as much more as we would than if they just had those 10 verbal words. So it increases how much.
Being outside in the environment, and
absolutely.
Kind of, sometimes I will have it open, or a book open with Gabe right now. He's about 4.5 months now, and he'll just tap on a page. So I talk about what he's tapping versus what the words actually say on the book, because it's what he's interested in or shows interest in.
Yeah, totally. So the third reason I kind of wanted to talk about, as far as why sign language promotes language development, is that when we feel good at something, we want to do more of it. So when learning is made easier and we feel successful at it, we just want to keep doing that. And so when a child feels like they're a successful communicator more, and you know, the same way that crawling encourages kids to walk because it helps them feel like they're successful movers. Same thing with signing. When children feel like they're successful at signing, it encourages them to try that harder skill of talking.
Interesting. That makes sense. Yes. Well, thanks for sharing that one. Something else that we wanted to chat about was approximations. So the signing approximations, why kids do them, and what parents or adults or caregivers can do about it.
Yeah. So really, when we learn a new skill in general, any new motor skill, we're not going to be very good at it. If you, if you try to go golf and you've never golfed before, or if you try to go snowboarding, you've never snowboarded before, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be full of mistakes. And the same thing goes for learning to sign and for learning to talk, especially for our children that don't have the same fine motor and gross motor control that we do. So when kids learn how to sign and when they learn how to talk, they're full of mistakes. And this is what we call approximations, because their sign looks approximately like the adult version of the sign, or their word sounds approximately like the adult version of the word. And so we want to always continue to model the correct version of the word, of the sign. So if they're signing more, I sign the sign more like this. This is the correct version of it. When my son, who's now 18 months old, when he started signing more, he just clapped.
Right. I see that lots.
Yeah, this is a really common approximation of more. So I always encourage families, you want to keep doing this. This is the correct version, because your child, first of all, they think they're doing the correct version. So if you all of a sudden make your sign look like their sign, they're going to be really confused. The other reason is that we want them to eventually refine their sign to look like this. And now my son does do this. The same thing for milk. When he first started signing milk, he just waved at me. This was his milk sign. Now he is able to do it the correct way. So you always want to keep doing it the correct adult version. And same thing with talking. So if your child says Nana for banana, you want to make sure that you're continuing to say banana and model the correct version for them.
Yes. And sometimes I do wonder if it has to do with the fine motor skills or just how they're able to. So going back to bird, my little one's always on bird. Can you see that one? Coming inwards, which is just a lot to do with how the structure is of the wrist and the fingers and the arms. So just keep on signing bird instead of switching it to mirror them. And
and my little guy does bird this way. He does it with his whole hand, which is actually the sign for duck. But he does with his whole hand. So just another approximation.
Absolutely. And they learn to, as they mature in their language and signing, they go differently. Our oldest always signed mom with just his index finger, but then he would actually like tap once for mom, tap twice for grandma, and tap 3 times for Gigi, right? So it was kind of, you had to count a little bit and do a little bit of work, yet he knew who he was talking to, but we had to really watch. Yeah, so never know what their approximations will be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that kind of segues me to the next point that I wanted to talk about. I think a lot of families hesitate to really call a child's sign approximation or word approximation. They hesitate to really count it as a true word or a true sign. And so I'll have families, start to write down all of the words and all of the signs that their child is using, because they see online that their child is supposed to have, 50 words. And they're like, oh, my child only has 10. And they start to write it down, but they aren't counting a lot of those approximations. And so I wanted to mention, as a speech therapist, what I count as a true word. So first of all, we want to know, is the approximation close to the target sign or to the target word? So for instance, if your child says ba and they mean ball, it sounds pretty close. That's pretty close to ball if you say ba. Or kind of going back to our sign approximations. If your child does this for bird or does this for bird, it's pretty close. This is the adult version. That's pretty close. Or do they do this or more? It's pretty close, right?
Or ball, but it could be.
Yeah, exactly. They do it down here. Yeah, exactly. It's close enough, right? The second criteria is, do they make the same sound for that same thing every time? So essentially, when they see that object or that person, or when they're communicating a specific idea, is it consistently the same sign? So is bird always like this? Or is help or more always like this? And does ball always sound like ba? Or do they change it up? So if it's always consistently the same thing, that kind of helps me believe that it is a true word or a true sign, if that makes sense.
It's kind of like that the child is really believing that they're saying it or signing it the correct way, even though they have to do a little more work on it.
Right. So is it consistent?
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, does that sign, maybe this for more or this for bird, do they only do it for bird, or do they only do this for more? So we want to make sure that children aren't just clapping for every single thing, or maybe they're actually clapping. That was hard for me to kind of figure out too when my kiddo was first starting to sign. He was clapping and he was signing more, but it was a clap. Or is this meaning a lot of different things? We want to make sure that it is kind of just meaning one thing. So that's the third criteria that I look for. So I like to make sure that we're counting all of children's words and signs, even if they aren't exactly perfect, because they really do deserve credit for that, and they are building their language skills with those.
Yes, and they almost are sounding like they are communicating with confidence and empowerment over their situation when they are doing the same sign and the same word approximation in the right context.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, there are some very predictable mistakes that kids make when they start talking. And these are things that families come to me with questions about a lot as well. So in speech therapy world, there's something called phonological processes, which is basically just a fancy way of saying patterns that kids use to make adult speech easier.
Sorry,
and they're very predictable. So
I think we lost you there, Emily. Yeah, sorry. Can you go back to the definition of, or just go back to the predictable parts?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, so, yeah, no problem. So we use this term, it's phonological processes. And that's just, again, it's a fancy way of saying that children use patterns of speech to make talking easier. Because talking is, like I said, it's really hard. And so kids try to simplify it using patterns. Sorry, my cat's going to make a guest appearance here.
It's all good.
So some of the more common phonological processes or patterns that we hear children use are things like taking off the final sound of the word. So like we said, ball earlier is a good example. Oh, hello, kitty. Instead of saying ball, they might say ba, because they're leaving off that final sound. So that's called final consonant deletion. Or instead of saying cat, they might say ca, or dog is da. And so they leave off that final sound. Very common. And like I said, we always still want to count that as a word. And you want to still continue to say cat and dog and use those final sounds. But very commonly, kids leave off the final sounds of words. And that's common till they're 2 or 3 years old. Another common one is to leave off a syllable in a longer word than a word that has multiple syllables. So like banana might become nana. So they're leaving off an entire syllable. Or elephant might become elephant. So they kind of leave off part of the word, leaving off the syllable. And there's a couple other ones, but there's a couple red flags I want to make sure families are aware of when it comes to these patterns. If your child is leaving off the first sound of a word very consistently, so if dog is og or cat is at, that's usually a red flag. And you would probably want to make sure that you're talking with a speech therapist about any kinds of patterns like that where they're leaving off the first sound. That can be indicative of a more severe speech error.
Okay. That's also a great one to know.
Also, if you're not hearing very many consonants in general, so if your child is just using a lot of vowels and they sound like this, e-a-o, e-a-u, e-a, and they don't use a lot of consonants, that's also another big red flag. Okay.
And it's just get some early intervention, or at least what I always share is there's nothing wrong with early intervention. In fact, like based on brain science, we know when we get those connections going in the brain, it just lifelong learning just happens to grow. And like, at least up here in Saskatoon, we have probably about a 9 to 12 month wait list for public services with it. Wow. So get on the list sooner than possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, early intervention is fabulous. I'm down in Michigan in the U.S. and thankfully we don't have quite a list like that. But it's a great time to seek help. We always want to seek help earlier rather than later. Even if you just have some worries in the back of your head, it's better to just know that everything is okay and go ahead and ask for help earlier rather than later. So here in this case, the early intervention program is from birth to 3. And I love to see kids in that program as early as possible. I've worked in early intervention and, we know that children in their 2s can already feel frustrated about a lot of things. And if you add into that they can't communicate, then everybody in the whole house is extra frustrated. So we always want to, encourage help earlier rather than later.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Yes. So thank you for pointing that out and enforcing the importance of early intervention as needed. And you never know, they might just outgrow it or need the extra help. Yes.
Yep, you never know, but it's always better to be safe than sorry.
Oh, for sure. We did that with our daughter, our middle child. And it turns out that she just picked it up after doing a lot more intensive work here at home, just with the background that I do. And while she was on the list, we just kept tracking at it, and eventually she outgrew. Well, she just started to flourish and develop it. So it's good to see, yet knowing that we were on the list just in case we needed some more interventions. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for spending the last little bit with us. And I'm going to encourage anyone who's watching us to comment below. Ask any questions. Either Emily or myself will come on and answer questions or provide resources or support, that kind of idea. Again, Emily's Facebook is the high 5, like the number 5, communications resources, and her website is phenomenal as well. So I'll have those linked in the comments below, as well as on my website when it goes up.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me, Tanya.
Thank you so much.